Thank you very much, and thank you for the very warm welcome. I'm delighted to be here in Malaysia. I've been here for about 4 days now, I think. We visited Malacca yesterday, and it's just been a great experience. I'm here on behalf of the American Council of Young Political Leaders, and my host, Hadi, came to the States and to Iowa and was in my office in Des Moines, Iowa for 4 weeks, and as part of that program, I'm able to come to Malaysia and follow on with Hadi's work. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the U.S. 2016 presidential election, and specifically the Iowa caucuses. We'll get into some issues later on in the presentation, but certainly if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask, and if I don't hit on something that you are particularly interested in, please ask me afterward, and I'd love to touch on that topic. From a Republican perspective, of course, in the United States, we have a two-party system. There are Republicans and there are Democrats. Rarely, if ever, is a third party ever elected. It's generally one or the other. And so from a Republican perspective, we look at limited government. Democrats look at it from a little different angle. From a limited government perspective, we look back to the founding of our country and some of the founding documents that helped establish our government. James Madison, one of the founding fathers, stated, "The general government is not to be charged with the whole power of making and administering laws. Its jurisdiction is limited." And I'll let you read the rest. Again, a limited government, and that's where the Republican perspective, as you look at various issues in certainly U.S. politics, when you're thinking about it from a Republican perspective, you think about it from a very limited government perspective. Not only a limited government perspective, but a limited federal government perspective. When the U.S. established its Constitution, we had just come from Great Britain, where people didn't feel that they had a say in their government. And so we developed a system which put the power in the hands of the people. We wanted a very limited federal government, and when you look at the conversations that were going on at the time of our Constitution's founding, there was a great debate on how powerful the federal government should be. As Republicans, we look back to those founding documents and again agree that the government should be limited. Power should be in the hands of the people. A brief overview. Again, in the U.S., we have a federal government that has 3 separate branches: the legislative branch, which has a House and a Senate; the executive branch, which is the presidency; and then the judicial branch, which is our court system, with the Supreme Court being the highest court. We also have 50 states in the United States, each one with its own state government. It models, every state government models the federal government, in that there is 3 equal branches: the judicial, again, the legislative, and the executive. The executive branch in a state is controlled by the governor. All of these are elected positions. And then you get all the way down to the local level. And this is where we differ from many other countries. We don't appoint local elected officials. They are elected. So, for instance, I'm a city councilor in the city of Grimes. I was just elected this last fall. All the way down to school board. The organization and the people that administer our schools are elected positions. The importance of that elected position is really key to the democracy and the republic that we have in the United States. And that is that if you don't like the decisions that one of those elected officials are making, if you don't agree with the direction that the country is going, that your school is going, or that your city is going, the people, again, have the power. They can vote that person out. They can vote somebody else in. The power of the vote is central to our form of government. We'll talk here in a minute about the primary election process and choosing of the candidates. So most times you hear about the general election, And in the fall of this year, fall of 2016, we're going to have our U.S. presidential election. And we'll have one Republican and one Democrat. They'll go head to head, and we'll debate the issues. We'll talk about why the other person isn't right for the job and why our guy is or our woman is. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we talk in political science terms in the United States about a political pendulum. And as you can see by this chart, one-party control doesn't stay in control forever. It swings back and forth. And that's what we're seeing here. From 1901, again, Republicans had control. In 1913, Democrats took control. And you can see the progression. Now, we feel in the United States, from a Republican perspective, that after 8 years of President Barack Obama, a Democrat, that political pendulum is swinging back to the center and hopefully, in our case, to the right. So we feel like it's a good climate for a Republican to be elected president. The Iowa caucuses. Part of the process, and really the first step in the process of the presidential election, is for the two major parties to select their candidate. We have an organization called the Republican National Committee. That's the overarching committee that organizes the entire party, and the Democrat National Committee is on the Democrat side. And they set up a primary calendar wherein each state, all 50, get their say in who the presidential candidate should be. They elect delegates that go on to a national convention, and ultimately the candidate is chosen by those delegates. But in reality, the candidate is chosen by the number of states that candidate wins prior to the convention. Iowa, because of tradition from 1970s, starts off that process. So when you come to the state of Iowa, and Hadi was able to experience this a little bit when he was here in the States last fall, every presidential candidate spends a lot of time in the state of Iowa. They don't spend a lot of time in some of the larger states. California, for instance, is one of the largest states in our country. It has vastly more people than the state of Iowa. But you won't find presidential candidates in the state of California. You'll find them all in Iowa, because Iowa is the first place that decides that we're the first state that is going to make our voice heard on which of the candidates, both on the Republican side and the Democrat side, we think should be our party's nominee. On the Republican side this time, we certainly have a vast array of candidates, more candidates than we've had in quite a long time to choose from. On the Democrat side, it's down to 3 primary candidates, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and Martin O'Malley. Again, the reasons that Iowa makes sense to go first, other than tradition, is that Iowa is a swing state. Meaning we aren't just a Republican state, one that you'd say, okay, they're solidly Republican every year. We're also not just a solidly Democrat state. We currently have a Republican governor. 2 elections ago, we had a Democrat governor for quite some time. Before that, we had a Republican governor. 3 terms before that. It goes back and forth. Iowans are generally fairly focused on the middle, on good governance. And they don't necessarily ascribe to one-party control of all of their state government. They like to see a split-party control. When you look at our U.S. senators, every state in the United States gets 2 U.S. senators. Iowa's U.S. senators for a long time were 1 Republican and 1 Democrat. Recently, the 1 Democrat, who was there for a long time, retired, and during that election, another Republican won. So now we have 2 Republican U.S. senators. But don't hold your breath, that probably won't last for very long. Again, Iowans like to have split control in the state, and so that's why we've got a swing state status. So even after this presidential nominating contest, when you look at the general election, once we have those 2 candidates, those candidates tend to come back to Iowa. Because just as you have, I'm sure here, there are certain states that are always going to go Republican. There are other states that are always going to be Democrat states. But there's only a handful in the middle that can be decided and swayed one way or the other. Iowa is one of those states. We also have a focus on retail politics. Iowans expect that the candidates are going to come to their communities and answer their questions. So most Iowans will get the opportunity to shake hands with every presidential candidate and ask them whatever questions they have. It's also relatively inexpensive. When you look at media buys, going on TV, buying radio spots, your campaign money goes a lot further in Iowa than it does in some of the other states. So those are all reasons why Iowa goes first. Now the Iowa caucuses, as far as the process, a caucus is very different than a primary. Those are the two types of ways that we get to have our say on who our presidential candidate should be. New Hampshire has the first primary. Iowa has the first caucus. It's very different than what you're probably used to. A primary, you go and you fill out the ballot, you stick it in the machine, and you're done. With a caucus, it's a community meeting, very similar to this. We'd come into a room similar to this, and on the Democrat side, they have what they call a viability threshold. That means your candidate has to receive so much support, and if they don't have that amount of support, those people that are in the room supporting that candidate then have to go to one of the other candidates and support that because their candidate was not viable at their caucus. On the Republican side, and I'm going to briefly go over this, Republican side, we don't have viability thresholds. You simply come to a meeting such as this. People would be sitting just as you are. You would elect delegates to the county convention, and then at that point, they would elect delegates to the district and state convention. And at that point, they elect delegates to the national convention. And remember, that national convention is really where our candidate is decided. You also elect people to be the workers for your party. They don't get paid. These are volunteer positions, but we would elect people to what we call the County Central Committee. And the County Central Committee, again, is the governing body on a local level of our Republican Party and of the Democrat Party. And then you get to the presidential preference poll. Again, you're not going and filling out a ballot. You simply get a sheet of paper, you write down the name of the candidate that you like best, and you hand it in, and at a table at the front, a couple of people would sort out all of the different candidate names and announce to the group the number of votes for each candidate. We then send that information in via an app on our phone. One person from the precinct is the recorder, and they send that information into the state party, which accumulates all of the information for the more than 1,700 precincts in the state of Iowa that are each holding their own caucus. They compile that information and then they release that to the news media. And that's what you'll see on TV. On February 1st, which is when our caucus is, CNN, NBC, all of the Fox News, all of the major news networks will be in Iowa, in Des Moines, Iowa, and they will be broadcasting live what the results of the Iowa caucus were. It's not just important as a candidate whether or not you got first place in Iowa. We talk about 3 tickets out of Iowa. And that's generally viewed as the top 3. So even if you get second place, that's not bad. If you get third place, not bad. What you really look for in a candidate, and from a media perspective, and certainly as the other states are looking at Iowa and deciding for themselves who their candidate is going to be, is who exceeded expectations. Who did the polls think was going to come in 5th place, but actually came in 3rd? Who did they think was going to do really well, maybe win the Iowa caucuses, but ended up getting 4th or 2nd, and who edged them out? Exceeding expectations is really the key, because as you exceed expectations, you get more media coverage that you're not having to pay for. When you get that media coverage, of course, as all of you know, the more time you're on TV, the more people see you. And the more people that see you, the better of chances you have at getting your nomination. Major issues in the 2016 presidential election. I'm showing the Republican side, and it doesn't show all of the candidates over here. And the recent Democrat debate on your left. If you look at this slide, there are 3 candidates, and I strategically chose those 3 candidates for a reason, and that is that they are seen as the 3 leading contenders in the state of Iowa, but not just the state of Iowa. Really, as you look at the process moving forward, they're the three most viable candidates, and we'll get to them in a moment. On the Democrat side, again, you only have three candidates left, and so their field is kind of set, and really it's only between two candidates. It's Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Differences between Republicans and Democrats. Again, we kind of touched on this at the beginning, but Republicans prefer power and decision-making be left to the people and the private sector with a limited government. Democrats prefer power and decision-making be heavily regulated or controlled by the government. So that's really the difference when you get down to the root of it between the two parties. When you look at the issues, this is a Pew Research Center study from September 22nd through the 27th of last year, 2015. There's wide partisan gaps over the importance of environment, deficit, and health care. If you look at the red line is the Republican-leaning votes and how important they think that issue is. And the blue is the Democrat-leaning votes and how important they think the particular issue is. When it comes to the federal budget, 78% of Republicans say that's a really important issue. Again, spending is a very important issue for Republicans. We're very conservative in our spending. We don't think that government should spend more than it's taking in revenue. And we also don't think it should take, just because it wants to spend more, should tax the people more. Taxes are high enough. We need to learn how to spend within our means. Just as a family has a budget, and we all have personal budgets, the government needs to have a budget. Likewise, when you look at the economy, a very related topic, again, Republicans, 89% of Republicans view that as a very important issue, whereas only 79% of Democrats. On the flip side, health care, very important topic that President Obama addressed in his passage of Obamacare. 82% of Democrats view that as one of the very important issue, whereas Republicans only 66%. So you can see that on many issues we agree. Economy, we're only off by about 10 points, and really most people, 79% of Democrats, 89% of Republicans agree that the economy is a very important issue. But you start to see trends in this data, and the trends are that Republicans prefer fiscal issues and fiscal conservatism. Democrats are looking at more social issues like the environment, like health care, and other social issues that they tend to focus on. So in looking at the issues, I'm going to point out just a couple that have really come up in the presidential election. I'll talk about those briefly, and then I really want to get to questions so I make sure that I'm addressing the issues that you find important. But a couple of the issues that have come up first, one that both Senator Bernie Sanders on the Democrat side and Hillary Clinton have talked about, is free education. Right now in America, the government provides education from kindergarten, which is age 5, all the way up through high school, which is age 18. The government provides assistance to people if they want to go to post-secondary school, college. They don't pay for all of it, but they provide assistance based on financial need. So if you have a need, then you get financial assistance. If your parents have too much money or you have too much money, sorry, you're out of luck. You got to pay for it yourself. Most people, when they go to college, have to get loans. Those loans have a slightly higher interest rate than a car loan would be. Senator Bernie Sanders has asked that the United States provide free college education. That really bothers me on another number of different levels when I hear people talk about free anything when it comes to government. Because, as you know, nothing is free. Everything costs money. The professor at the college doesn't volunteer his time or her time to teach the college class. The electric company that turns the lights on at the college campus doesn't just give them the energy for free. All of that stuff costs money. All the way down to the janitor that's cleaning up at night, all of the college classrooms, he expects to, or she expects to get paid. Nothing is free. And so when we use words on a campaign about free education, we're not talking about free for everyone. We're talking about free for the person who's receiving the benefit of that education, but certainly not free for the person who's paying the bill. And that's where the rift comes between the Republicans and the Democrats. Democrats will talk about free services, which really means the government coming in, controlling that, and then taxing the people using their money to spend it as they see fit, in this case, education. Republicans look at it from a standpoint of, we provide a free basic education that everyone should get, K through 12, through age 18. That education is very important, and Republicans are committed to putting resources into education. But when you go beyond that to secondary education, not everybody needs a secondary college education. Not everyone is cut out for a college education. Some people need 4 years of college education. Other people go for 8 years. They want to have their doctorate and have a lot of education. And the jobs that they hold after that education require all 8 years. Other people only need a 2-year degree. So there's really a wide range after you get through high school. Republicans believe that we need to look at what is driving the cost of education. Why is education becoming so expensive for college education? But instead of focusing on those issues, people who address college education as we want to provide free education are bypassing that. They're simply playing to people's hearts and minds and saying, if you have a child who's getting ready for college, wouldn't it be nice if they got that college education paid for by somebody else and not you? That does sound really good. Senator Bernie Sanders has used on the campaign trail that why should a college loan cost more in interest than a car loan? The answer to that is simple microeconomics. When you get a loan in a car, you have collateral. The bank can come back and take your car away if you don't make your car payment. They can then sell that car and recoup their loan. With an education, once that knowledge goes in, there's no way to get it back out. The bank can't come back on you and say, I want your 4 years of education back. Give it back to me so I can sell it to someone else. So of course, there's no collateral there. Thus, the interest rate is going to be higher. These are issues that Republicans look at. Again, fiscal issues. How can we have a limited government, one that doesn't come into education and simply control everything and tax the people to spend their money the way that government sees fit? In exchange, Republicans propose that we want to empower people, give people the option, make it affordable, but give them the option to go to college for as many years as they want to go to. If they want to become a doctor and go to college for 8 years, fantastic. Let's empower them to make that choice for themselves. Likewise, if somebody really likes to be a car mechanic and wants to go to college for 2 years to be a car mechanic, in which case they can make a very good living in the United States, we should empower them to go to college for 2 years and be the best car mechanic that they can be. But we shouldn't pigeonhole everyone into thinking that 4 years of college is the ultimate requirement for everyone, because it's really not. We need a broad sector of jobs when you look at the economy. And some of those jobs, again, require no college education. We hope that people get some education because it helps their lifestyle. It helps their level of living. But that's up to them. We believe in letting people decide their path to personal life. So with that, I think I'll end my presentation and certainly want to take your questions so I don't leave anything out that you really want to ask. But thank you very much for your time tonight, and I look forward to our conversation.